They said the sky wept fire the night Naya was born. The village of Karamo, nestled between the low hills and thick canopies of an ancient forest, was silent in reverence and fear as a rare red moon rose above the world. Its crimson light spilled over the huts, bathing everything in a hue that made blood and water indistinguishable. Animals cowered, owls refused to hoot, and even the wind stilled as if listening. Inside a straw-thatched hut at the edge of the village, screams echoed, labored, guttural, fierce. A woman, skin slick with sweat, hair matted to her face, pushed through pain as the midwives shouted prayers to the old gods. Outside, a crowd had gathered. Elders stood at the front, robes flowing like shadows, staffs in hand. Behind them, the curious and the frightened, children clutching mothers, warriors gripping spears, women whispering omens to one another. "She comes under the blood moon," whispered an elder woman named Mayo. Her voice shook as she clutched a set of ancient bones in her palm, shaking them to read. "This is not a child of joy. This is a child of mourning." Inside the hut, a final cry, then silence. The midwife emerged moments later, holding the baby. She did not cry. Her eyes were open, large and dark, and she blinked slowly as if unimpressed by the world she had just entered. "She is healthy," the midwife said. "But," she hesitated. "She looked at me, as if she knew my name." Gasps rose. The oldest elder, Oma Burrow, stepped forward. "Bring her to me." The baby was passed to him, swaddled in goat wool. He lifted her to the moonlight. Her skin glowed faintly in its eerie light. The elder's lips trembled. "She will never be loved," he whispered. "Any heart that beats for her will bleed. Any touch that seeks her warmth will rot. She is cursed." The words fell on the crowd like a thunderclap. Her mother, exhausted and too weak to rise, whispered from inside the hut, "Naya? Her name is Naya." The elder looked at her with sorrow. "Then Naya shall be known by all but never held. She shall be seen but never cherished." He took a charcoal from the ritual fire and drew a mark over her brow, a diagonal slash intersected by 3 short lines. "The mark of solitude," he said, "to remind us she is not to be loved, not to be touched, not to be embraced." From that day forward, Naya was treated with distant fear. As she grew, she was given a hut at the far edge of the village, near the place where the trees thickened into whispering groves. Food was left at her door. Clothes were tossed from a distance. No one dared speak her name without spitting over their left shoulder. When she passed by, people lowered their eyes, children hid behind legs, and mothers clutched charms to their chests. Naya grew with a sharp mind and a sharper sense of aloneness. She learned to speak by listening through walls. She taught herself to read using discarded scrolls and markings on burial stones. She taught herself to sing, though no one heard her melodies but the birds who dared to perch near her window. Once, when she was 7, a dog followed her from the river. It licked her hand and wagged its tail. That night, it bled from its eyes and died by dawn. The village called it a warning. By the time she was 10, Naya had stopped smiling. By the time she was 12, she had stopped hoping. But the forest did not fear her. At night, she would wander into the trees. The owls hooted near her. Fireflies circled her hair like a crown. She slept near tree roots and dreamt of things that came true. The forest whispered to her and she whispered back. It was the only place where silence didn't feel like exile, it felt like conversation. On her 13th birthday, the moon turned red again. Panic struck the village. Elders gathered in the central hut and performed cleansing rituals. Chickens were slaughtered, chants filled the air, and the scent of burning herbs drifted like smoke from every doorway. They believed another curse was coming. But the curse had already arrived years ago, and now it was watching from the woods. That night, Naya stood in a clearing barefoot with the moonlight falling over her. She held out her hands to the sky. "Why am I hated?" she asked, though no one answered. "Why do hearts bleed for me?" she whispered. "Even before they know me?" The wind rustled the leaves. An owl hooted. She sat beside an old, gnarled tree and pressed her back against it. "Will I grow old alone? Will I die before ever being held?" The forest shifted. And then it spoke, not in words but in something older. A warmth brushed her skin. Not like a touch of a hand but like heat through bone. A vibration, low and tender, echoed in her chest. It was as if something unseen, something formless and watching, leaned close. "You are not alone," it seemed to say. But what loved her did not have a name. It did not belong to the world of humans. It was older than curses, older than names. After that night, strange things began to happen. A boy named Tembo, kind and quiet, once brought her a flower. He left it on the stone near her hut and ran. The next morning his tongue was black and he could no longer speak. His mother wailed and accused Naya. She took his words. The elders punished her. They tied her to the village's sacred tree for 2 days, denying her food or water. But even bound and weak, she did not cry. She stared into the dark woods and something stared back, protective and quiet. The next week Tembo woke from sleep screaming. "She is not cursed," he shouted. "She is protected. It's not her, it's what loves her." But no one listened. They called it madness. More years passed. Naya, now 16, had grown into beauty, fierce as the thorned rose that blooms in drought. Her hair was a cascade of black rivers, her eyes dark like forest soil. Boys admired her from a distance but dared not dream. Girls gossiped but with reverence. Still she walked alone. And yet, no harm ever came to her. Not from man. Not from beast. Not from time. Even when lightning struck her hut once, the fire stopped inches from her skin. When she fell from a hill once, she landed on soft leaves that hadn't been there before. It was clear to those who paid attention. Something watched over Naya. But whether it was a blessing or something worse, no one could say. The elders debated. "The curse is no longer sleeping," one whispered. "It watches her now," another muttered. "It grows jealous. It protects her not out of love but obsession." But Naya began to feel it too. She felt the warmth in her chest whenever she cried. She felt the way her hut grew warmer in storms. She felt the whispers in her dreams, soothing, low, like lullabies sung by trees. She began to wonder. What if her curse wasn't hate? What if it was love in its most dangerous form? What if something ancient and lonely had marked her at birth, not to torment her, but to keep her, guard her, love her in the only way it knew how? What if her curse wasn't that no one would love her? What if her curse was that only it could? And what happens, she began to wonder, when that love becomes jealous? The answer would come, but not gently. The rain came as it always did during the harvest season. Soft at first, like whispers on the rooftops, then heavy, like the sky weeping over the village. Naya sat beneath the twisted fig tree at the edge of the compound, her legs tucked beneath her, her face tilted up toward the gray sky. She didn't mind the rain. It was the only time the world seemed to quiet enough for her to think. The only time she could pretend her life wasn't what it was. She was 14 now, tall for her age and strange-looking, or so they said. Her hair grew longer than most girls', darker too, with strands that shimmered red when hit by light. Her eyes were almost silver, like polished stone, and many whispered they'd seen them glow in the dark. But it wasn't her beauty that set her apart. It was the blood moon, the night she was born under. The night the old midwife screamed and dropped her knife when she saw the baby's eyes open too early. That night, her mother died without holding her, and the whispers began. The curse, they said, was in her very breath. She will never be loved, the elders had declared. And if someone tries, they will bleed. Naya never had a friend. Children stayed away, parents pulled their kids aside when she walked by. Even her own aunt, who had reluctantly taken her in, spoke only in commands: cook, clean, fetch. But Naya had learned not to cry. The tears never changed anything. It was during one of these rain-heavy days that a boy named Dumo first spoke to her. He wasn't like the others. He had just moved to the village with his older brother after their parents' death in the neighboring war. Dumo was curious, bold, and most dangerously kind. He found Naya watching the river one evening. The sky was bruised purple, the storm brewing again in the distance. Dumo stood beside her without asking, and for a long time neither of them spoke. Then he simply said, "You like the water?" Naya blinked, unsure how to respond. No one had spoken to her like that before, not with a voice that didn't carry fear or suspicion. She nodded. "I do too," he said. "My mother used to say the river carries more than water. It carries memory." She glanced at him sideways. "Memory?" He smiled. "Yes. If you stand quietly, you can hear it." They stood there for nearly an hour, and for the first time in her life, Naya felt something stir in her chest. Something unfamiliar. Warmth. Maybe even joy. But she told herself not to get used to it. Not to hope. Hope was dangerous for someone like her. Over the next few days, Dumo kept finding her. At the fig tree. By the stream. Outside the grain shed. He brought her roasted nuts, shared tales he'd heard from traveling traders, and even tried to make her laugh, which surprisingly he managed once. Naya's smile was crooked and unsure, but Dumo beamed as though it were sunlight itself. But the village watched. The whispers returned. "She's cursing him. He doesn't know who she is. It's not right." Naya tried to push Dumo away. She stopped showing up at her usual spots. But he always found her. "I don't care what they say," he told her. "I don't believe in curses. You're just a girl. You're just lonely." And maybe, in some forgotten corner of her heart, Naya started to believe that too. Then came the rainstorm. It was heavier than usual, with the kind of thunder that shook the ground and lightning that ripped open the sky. Naya was returning from the far field where she'd been sent to collect firewood, her arms soaked and shivering when she saw him, Dumo, by the riverbank. He waved to her. "Come," he shouted over the wind. "I want to show you something." Naya hesitated. Her feet froze in the mud. "Just for a minute," he called. "Please?" Something in her chest pulled her forward. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was that same warmth that had started days ago. She stepped closer. The rain fell harder. He held out his hand. She reached for it. Their fingers touched for barely a second, skin against skin, and the world changed. Dumo's eyes widened. He gasped and stumbled backward, slipping on the wet rocks. Naya screamed his name as he fell into the river. The current, swollen from the storm, dragged him fast. He thrashed, struggling to find footing, calling out, coughing. Naya ran along the bank, her voice hoarse. "Dumo, hold on. Please." But there was no one else around. No other help. The water swallowed him whole. A final bubble of air. Then silence. They never found his body. The village erupted in fury. "You killed him," someone shouted. "She touched him and the river took him. It's the curse, it always takes anyone who comes close." They dragged Naya to the elder's compound. Her aunt did not speak for her. No one did. Naya didn't struggle. She didn't cry. She stood there, soaked and shaking, staring at the floor. "What did you do, child?" one of the elders asked. Naya looked up. "I touched his hand," she whispered. "Only his hand." There was silence. Then a woman wailed. "It's true. It's true. She should never have been allowed to live." But the village couldn't kill her. That much had been decided long ago. If they harmed the girl, the curse might bleed into their homes, their crops, their children. Instead, they banned her from the riverside. She was not to step near water. Not to speak to any child. Not to sleep in the same compound as anyone else. Her aunt built a small hut for her at the edge of the forest, far enough that her presence wouldn't taint the village. And so Naya lived there alone. At night, she heard whispers outside her door, soft voices, not of people but something else. Sometimes the whisper sounded like Dumo. Other times like the river itself calling her name. Her dreams were no better. They showed her Dumo's hand reaching from the water, his face pale and blue, his voice a hollow echo, "I'm still here." She started seeing things. A shadow that moved across her wall without a source. Wet footprints at her doorway. Once she woke with a bracelet beside her, Dumo's bracelet. The one he wore always, with tiny carved beads shaped like tiny birds. She clutched it to her chest and wept. But more than fear, more than sadness, Naya felt rage. Rage at the village for cursing her. Rage at the elders who had declared her fate before she could even speak. Rage at the gods, if they existed, for making her a vessel of sorrow. But deepest of all, rage at herself. For daring to hope. For believing she could be loved. She began talking to the rain. "Take me too," she whispered one night. "If love cannot live near me, let me drown in it." The wind howled. But she didn't drown. Instead, the presence grew stronger. It whispered back, "You are not alone." And in the shadows behind her hut, something moved. Something unseen. Something tied to her, born the night she was. A curse, or something more. Naya would soon learn that some curses are not punishments. Some curses are protectors. Some bleed, to defend. And love, even when forbidden, always finds a way to return. Even if it has to kill for it. The days blurred into each other for Naya, filled with whispers she could not explain and a silence that clung to her like damp mist. Her village, already weary of her presence, began to act more cautiously, almost reverently. They didn't call her by name anymore. They called her that child, the moon's omen, or the one with the empty eyes. People whispered that wherever she went, the wind stilled and birds ceased to sing. Children were pulled back indoors when she passed, and even dogs, once loyal companions, began to whimper and back away. But Naya wasn't alone. Not truly. Not anymore. It started with small things. Shadows that didn't match anything else in the room. The soft creak of floorboards when no one was walking. Doors that locked on their own, only when someone tried to get too close to her. Then came the dreams, vivid visions of a shapeless figure standing at the foot of her bed. It had no face, no name and no voice, but its presence pulsed with something strangely warm, protective, almost possessive. One afternoon, while fetching water from the riverbank alone, as always, she slipped on a mossy stone and began to fall. But she never hit the ground. Something caught her midair and held her steady. Her feet dangled a moment above the rocks before gently being lowered. The clay jug she dropped somehow rolled back into her hands untouched by mud. She stood frozen, staring at her palms, knowing what she had just experienced was not natural. She told no one. But she began to notice it more. When she walked into the forest, the trees seemed to hush. The animals would scatter, except the crows. They followed her in silence, perched high above as if serving as sentinel. Once, a wild boar lunged at her from the brush, tusks gleaming in fury in its eyes. Before she could scream, a thick branch snapped from above, slamming the beast to the ground. It didn't rise again. The branch had pierced its chest like a spear. No one believed her when she returned, blood spattered across her feet, saying it had happened on its own. She summoned it, muttered an old woman. She's feeding something, whispered another. Whispers followed her, but the creature followed closer. Naya began to test it. One night, while the moon hung pale and watchful, she lit a single candle and whispered aloud, "Are you real?" The flame flickered wildly and then steadied. She felt a warm breath near her ear. There was no wind. Then she started writing to it, chalk on stone, finger in dust, ink on old cloth. "What are you?" she'd ask. "Why me?" She never received words in reply, but something always responded. Her blankets pulled up when she forgot. Her food kept warm when she wandered too long. A raven brought her a bracelet once, silver and old, and dropped it at her feet before flying off. When she wore it, she felt less alone. She began to call it companion. But companionship came with blood. One dusk, a group of village boys cornered her behind the fields. They had stones in their hands and fear in their eyes. "You cursed my sister," one shouted. "She lost her baby because of your shadow." Naya begged them to stop. "I didn't do anything," she cried, backing against a tree. But the stones were raised. Only 2 ever left that place alive. The others, 2 of them, were found in the morning, their eyes wide open and limbs twisted at unnatural angles. No wounds. No blood. But terror frozen on their faces. The boy who survived swore something tore through the air, a black mist with eyes that weren't eyes at all. Something pulled the stones from his hand and whispered in a voice that was inside his bones. Never again. That boy left the village days later. He never spoke Naya's name again. From then on, Naya was untouched. Her family, distant and shamed, no longer looked her in the eye. Her father drank more, her mother wept silently. Her older brother refused to sleep under the same roof. But she no longer wept. The presence, her companion, grew bolder, clearer. At night she heard humming. A lullaby she never learned but somehow remembered. A memory that wasn't hers, sung in a voice too ancient to belong to anyone living. In her dreams, she stood in a burning field and something stood beside her, hand in hand, its form shifting between man, beast, shadow, and child. She asked it once in the dream, "Do you love me?" It didn't speak. It bled instead. In the dream, blood spilled from its chest and from the wound, wild roses bloomed. She woke up gasping, hand clenched around a single thorn. She tried once to walk away from it. To leave the village, flee into the mountains. She packed what little she had and ran before dawn. But the roads twisted. No matter where she went, she returned to the same tree, the one where the raven had dropped the bracelet. After the 3rd loop, she collapsed beneath it, weeping. "I want to be free," she whispered. The wind didn't blow. The birds didn't sing. But the bracelet pulsed on her wrist, warm like a heartbeat. It was then she understood. She was never meant to be alone. Never would be. Something had claimed her the night she was born, under the blood moon when the veil between love and fear was thinnest. Whatever had come that night, had stayed. And while others feared it, while others called her cursed, it loved her. In the only way it knew how. With blood. With silence. With protection that came at a cost. Naya stopped fearing it after that. She began to whisper to it without shame. "Thank you," she'd say when danger passed. "I'm not afraid," she'd murmur when shadows danced. And it answered, always, not in words but in presence. Even the villagers began to adapt. Offerings were left at her doorstep. Tokens. Stones with marks, feathers tied with string, small bowls of salt. Apologies. Appeasements. Everyone now understood she was the girl the curse loved. And the curse was watching. Naya no longer wept. She watched too. And in the reflection of her darkened windows, she sometimes saw another pair of eyes, glowing, patient, and always near. Waiting. Not to haunt, but to love. The day the final straw broke for the village was shrouded in an eerie silence. Chickens refused to cluck, goats refused to graze, and the river that once sang through the village moved like it carried secrets too heavy for its usual rhythm. Naya, now a girl of 13, had already felt like an outsider long before the villagers named her one. Whispers followed her like shadows, always muttering, always watching. But it wasn't the whispers that hurt, it was the fear in her mother's eyes, the hesitation in her touch, the constant tremble in her voice when she called Naya's name. That week, a series of events sealed Naya's fate. First, a man who once threw stones at her house was found dead with deep scratches across his chest. The strange part was that no predator was seen, and the wounds seemed too clean, too purposeful, like claws with intent. Then, a young girl who had laughed at Naya in the marketplace fell from a tree, her neck twisted unnaturally, although no one saw her climb it. And finally, when a healer from another village visited and tried to bless Naya with herbs, he ran out of her hut screaming, blind in one eye, claiming something unseen had clawed his face. It didn't take long before the people came with torches, not to burn her but to burn the home she lived in. They stood outside her mother's small mud hut, faces cold, silent in that way that was more dangerous than rage. Naya stood behind the doorway watching her mother beg them to leave them alone. She said her daughter was just a girl, not a demon, not a spirit's wife, not a vessel for death. But no one listened. They didn't break down the door. They didn't drag Naya away. Instead they left a decree, word from the elders that could not be refused. At dawn, Naya would be taken to the forest beyond the fourth tree line, where cursed children were abandoned. It was an old rule, ancient as the stones buried under the village. Those touched by misfortune must live where the sun barely reaches, beyond the cries of humanity. That night Naya didn't cry. She sat by the doorway staring at the moon that looked strangely full, though no one had predicted it. Her mother packed quietly, slipping dried maize and a small carved pendant into a sack. She didn't speak until she tied the sack and held it to her chest like it might stop her heart from breaking. "I don't believe them," she whispered. "But I cannot fight them. If I run they will kill us both." Naya nodded. She didn't blame her. Even the birds had stopped singing for her. They left before sunrise, moving in silence through the edge of the village. Naya's bare feet crunched gently on the forest path, dew wetting her ankles, the air heavy with sadness. Her mother didn't hold her hand but walked beside her as though leading someone to a funeral. They passed the fourth tree line before the sun rose high enough to burn away the mist. There, beneath a twisted fig tree, her mother stopped. "This is as far as I can go," she said, her voice breaking. "They'll be watching." Naya looked up, meeting her mother's eyes for what felt like the last time. "Will you come back?" Tears fell, but her mother didn't answer. She placed the sack in Naya's arms, kissed her forehead and turned away. The sound of her footsteps faded until only the forest spoke. At first, Naya stayed by the fig tree. She sat with her back against it, her arms around her knees, watching the sky change colors. She felt the wind shift, carrying with it a presence, familiar yet never seen. The same one that had always been with her, that made leaves rustle when there was no wind, that made animals howl before dying. "Are you here?" she whispered. No voice answered. But the tree behind her warmed, like hands pressed gently to her back. She wandered through the forest that night, finding shelter in a hollowed-out tree. There she listened. Not for predators or humans, but for whispers. The forest spoke in its own tongue, and Naya was learning to understand it. She knew now that she wasn't alone. And whatever it was that followed her, it had no form, no name, but it loved her in a way that the world never had. Days passed. She hunted small fruits, drank from the river, and sang quietly to herself under the trees. And yet, no creature dared come near her. One afternoon, a panther prowled through her clearing. It paused at the edge, eyes glowing, muscles tensed. Naya stood perfectly still, heart pounding. The panther stepped forward and then stopped. It sniffed the air, hissed, and suddenly yelped in terror, darting away like it had seen death itself. That night, as Naya lay curled on leaves, she whispered again. "Why do you protect me?" A chill rolled over her skin. The leaves rustled without wind. Then, something invisible brushed her cheek. Not claws. Not a cold chill. But something tender. A lullaby she didn't remember learning past her lips. She sang it softly, a tune from before she understood fear. Somewhere beyond her sight, the forest pulsed gently like a heart. Meanwhile, the village tried to move on, but fear remained like a rot under the skin. Crops began to wilt. Wells dried. Children fell ill without reason. The elders whispered among themselves, had they not done enough? Had they only made things worse by sending Naya into the forest? Some villagers began to believe that the curse had not left. That Naya was not the problem, but what followed her was. And it was angry. One night, the wind howled unnaturally loud. Roofs cracked. Fires burst in hearths without spark. An elder's house burned to the ground while he screamed about shadows choking him. No one saw what truly happened. But everyone remembered who they had cast away. Deep in the forest, Naya stood by the river's edge, staring at her reflection. She looked the same, but something inside her had shifted. She wasn't afraid anymore. She knew now that whatever followed her didn't want her to be hurt. It didn't kill because it hated. It killed because it loved. And maybe, just maybe, it had always been a part of her. She turned from the water, walking back to her hollow tree. Leaves parted gently to let her pass, like the forest itself was watching. When she reached her shelter, there were feathers, black, sleek, freshly fallen, laid in a circle around where she slept. A gift. A warning. A promise. That night, Naya didn't sing. She closed her eyes, listening to the wind speak her name. And the forest, like a mother with no voice, held her tight. Naya sat beneath the twisted roots of an ancient tree, its gnarled limbs stretching out like crooked fingers, sheltering her from the cold wind. The forest pulsed around her, alive with night sounds, the distant howl of a lone creature, the rustle of unseen movements, the flutter of wings slicing through darkness. She hadn't slept in days. Not properly. Her skin was pale with exhaustion, her fingers numb from the chill, her eyes wide and hollow from too many encounters with fear. But tonight something was different. The air was charged with a new kind of tension, not hostile, not quite welcoming, just waiting. Her lips trembled as she pulled her knees tighter to her chest. She whispered her own name softly over and over, as if trying to remind herself she was still here, still human, still real. Naya. The sound was soft. A whisper not made by her own lips. She froze. At first, she thought it was her mind playing tricks again, the isolation conjuring voices from nothing. But then it came again. Clearer this time. Gentle. Familiar, almost. Naya. It didn't echo through the forest like a shout. It didn't even seem to pass through the air. It settled directly into her ears, as though the trees themselves had spoken. Her breath caught. She stood slowly, her legs aching, her heart racing. Her eyes darted left and right into the shadows. "Who's there?" she called, her voice barely more than a croak. "Who are you?" There was silence for a beat. Then a low hum like the sound of wind through reeds. Leaves shivered above her, and her eyes caught a flicker, a sliver of shadow that moved too deliberately to be natural. She turned toward it. The darkness moved with her. "Don't be afraid," the voice said. "I've always been with you." Naya's throat tightened. "What do you mean, always?" The shadows around the base of the tree thickened, darkening until they seemed to take shape. Not solid. Not a person. But a form loosely bound by the edges of night itself. A shadow not cast but alive in its own right. "You were born with me," the voice said, now closer, clearer. "The world named me your curse. But I have never cursed you. I've only loved you." Naya stumbled back, nearly tripping over the roots behind her. "Loved me?" she spat, trembling. "Because of you they hate me. I watched them drag my mother away. I've never had a friend. The boy in the river. I never meant for them to die," the shadow whispered, and something like sorrow rippled through the air. "But I cannot let anything hurt you. You are mine to protect. Always." Naya shook her head. Her voice cracked. "You killed them. You whatever you are. You followed me my whole life. I felt you. I saw things die near me. You cursed me." "No," it said, and the wind stopped moving as the voice filled the stillness. "I am the shape your curse became. A part of you born of the blood moon. They named me evil, but I was never meant to be." She backed up until her spine pressed against bark. The shadow didn't come closer. It hovered in the space between them, shaped like the air around a flame, shifting, alive, uncertain. "Then what are you?" "I am what the curse couldn't kill," it said. "A shadow with a heart. A fragment of soul, bound by blood and love. You feared me, but I have guarded you. Every time pain came near, I stopped it. Sometimes, too late. Sometimes, too violently. I do not know how to be gentle. I only know I cannot let you go." Naya's lip trembled. "So it was real? All of it?" "Yes." "Then why me?" she whispered. "Why was I born like this?" The shadow's shape quivered as if in thought. Long ago in your line someone made a vow. A desperate promise for power or protection. It twisted through generations waiting for the right child. You were the one born beneath the blood moon. A girl with a heart so large the curse couldn't destroy it. So it took another form. It became me. She closed her eyes, hot tears rolling down her cheeks. Her whole life had been a question. Why her? Why so much pain? Why so much loneliness? And now the answer stood before her, not quite real, not quite imagined. You say you love me, she said finally. But what is love if it only brings more pain? The shadow shifted. Love is the only reason I exist. I have felt your every wound, Naya. Every tear. Every scream you held inside your chest. I wrapped around you like armor. But I didn't know how to soothe. Only how to stop the hurt at its source. I'm sorry for the pain I caused, but not for the lives I took. They meant to break you. I could not allow it. She didn't respond. Her thoughts spiraled in chaos. But in the silence, the shadow spoke again. Do you remember the river? Naya nodded faintly. He was kind. He didn't hurt me. No, the voice said quieter now. But his touch made your heart beat faster. It woke something deep inside. And that woke me. Her eyes widened. You were jealous? The shadow flickered, almost ashamed. Not jealous. Afraid. Afraid you would let someone else in and I would be forgotten. I didn't mean for the river to take him. I only meant to push him back. I didn't know it would claim him completely. A long pause stretched between them. I am learning, it said. I want to learn how to love without destroying. If you let me. Naya stared at the figure in the dark, so alien and yet so familiar. Every time she'd looked in the mirror and seen a shadow move behind her, it had been this. Every time she cried and felt a warmth on her skin, it had been this. She thought she had been alone. But she hadn't been. Not really. I don't know how to live like this, she said at last. I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want you to kill again. I will not, the voice said. Not unless you are in danger. You are the only reason I exist, Naya. If you wish for peace, I will learn peace. And if I wish for silence? Then I will sleep, the shadow said. Deep within you, as quiet as breath. But I will never be gone. She took a shaky breath. The wind picked up again, brushing her skin like a careful touch. The trees whispered around her, but they no longer felt ominous. They felt attentive. Can others see you? She asked. No, it answered. Only you. I belong only to you. And for the first time, those words didn't feel like a threat. They felt like a promise. Naya stepped away from the tree. The moon above had broken through the clouds, bathing the forest in red-tinted silver. The shadow beside her stayed near but didn't touch. I want answers, she said. About the curse. About who made it. About why it was passed to me. Then I will take you to the place where it began, it said. But the journey is dangerous. You will be hunted, by those who fear your truth and those who want your power. I'm not afraid anymore, she said. The shadow pulsed gently. Then we begin. And together, girl and curse, soul and shadow, they walked deeper into the forest, where the truth waited like roots beneath the soil. The day the stranger arrived, the forest did not warn her. It had always warned her before. A low ripple in the leaves, the sudden silence of birds, the rustle of something unseen brushing past branches too deliberately. Naya had learned to read the language of the forest like breath. If it was calm, she was safe. If it stirred, something was coming. But this time there was nothing. He came limping through the underbrush just as dusk began to fold the light into shadows. Naya, who had been sitting by the twisted roots of her favorite fig tree, tensed at the sound of a branch snapping. She melted into the undergrowth, eyes alert. Most creatures turned back once they reached the edge of her cursed space. But this one kept walking. A man. Not old, not young. His hair was in tight braids, the ends capped in copper that clinked softly when he moved. He wore a healer's bag slung across one shoulder, and blood stained one side of his robe. He looked exhausted but focused, the kind of focus only pain could teach. Naya narrowed her eyes. Strangers had wandered in before, hunters, travelers, fools. None stayed long. Some ran at the first glimpse of her. Some fell ill. Some died violently, their insides twisted like broken branches, eyes wide with something deeper than fear. And so she waited for it to happen again. He spotted her, somehow, even though she had hidden herself well. I see you, he said calmly. His voice didn't shake. Naya stepped out slowly, not to greet him, but to watch the moment the curse touched him. She had grown used to it, the recoil, the bleeding from nowhere, the screams of invisible hands ripping something apart. But none came. The man blinked, sweat beading on his brow. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "I was set. Or perhaps pulled. I don't know." She said nothing. "My name is Bakery," he added, panting as he dropped his healer's bag beside him. "I need to rest." She stared. Then the forest shifted. The wind moved, not how it normally moved. This wind was angry. A sharp hiss like breath drawn through teeth. The leaves curled. A low rumble passed through the branches. Naya felt it like a hand pressing against her chest. It was watching. Her curse was watching. She turned her head slowly as if to say, "Do you see him? Do you know what he is? The answer came not in words but in cold, sudden and slicing through her skin. Not for her. For him. Naya stepped between Bakery and the shadows. "If you stay here," she said finally, "you will die." He looked up. "If I leave I will die anyway. There is nothing left for me out there. My village is gone. My brother is gone. My purpose," he winced holding his side, "is cracked. Like my ribs." Naya did not smile, but her eyes softened for a breath. "Then rest. But do not expect kindness." Bakery managed a nod before collapsing into the leaves. That night Naya did not sleep. She sat awake with her back to a tree, the firelight flickering between her and Bakery's sleeping form. The shadows circled restlessly. The curse was furious. It had never been defied like this. Anyone who stepped into her world had paid for it. Why hadn't this man? She whispered into the dark. Why not him? The wind brushed her cheek soft this time. A question returned. "Do you want him to stay?" Naya didn't answer. Because she didn't know. But she didn't wake him either. The next morning, Bakery woke to the smell of roasted root and boiled bark tea. Naya handed him a crude wooden cup, her eyes cautious. "Thank you," he whispered. She said nothing. Days passed. Bakery stayed. He spoke often, not too much but enough. Enough to remind her what human voices sounded like when they weren't filled with fear or curses or pain. He told her of his mother, who used to sing to the moon. Of the war that took her. Of the brother who joined a rebellion and died for a king who never knew his name. Of the sickness that followed. And how he had wandered with only herbs and hope. Naya listened. When he slept, she traced the path of the shadows. When he moved, she watched the air ripple behind him, as if something was always close, waiting for permission to strike. But nothing did. One night as they sat by the fire, Bakery turned to her and said, "You're not evil, you know." Naya looked at him, startled. "The village said I was," she replied. "Even my mother gave me to the forest. She said it was safer that way." "She was afraid," he said. "Fear is not the same as truth. But people die near me. Then why am I alive?" She couldn't answer. Bakery reached for her hand. She flinched. "Don't," she whispered. But he didn't let go. She braced herself for the curse, the blood, the pain, the screaming wind. But none came. Only warmth. A tear slid down Naya's cheek. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why are you still breathing?" "I don't know," Bakery admitted. "But maybe whatever follows you doesn't hate me." They sat in silence. The forest watched. Naya dreamed that night for the first time in years. In her dream, the shadow spoke clearly. It was not angry. Not jealous. Not even cruel. It was lonely. Born from the blood moon. Born with her. Bound to her. It had watched love try to reach her and failed, because it couldn't understand how to let go of what it thought was protection. Every person who neared her it saw as a threat. It did not know the difference between danger and desire. Between harm and hope. Until now. Bakery had not come with lust. Not with greed. Not with pity. He had come with pain. And the curse recognized pain. It remembered the night Naya cried alone under the stars, when even the wolves had pitied her. It remembered the first time she bled and had no one to tell. It remembered her voice cracking as she whispered lullabies to herself. It remembered everything. And Bakery felt the same. The next morning Naya awoke with a different weight in her chest. She walked beside Bakery through the trees. No deaths followed them. No birds fell from the sky. No blood dripped from leaves. She reached for his hand, herself this time. The air shifted. The shadow stilled. Naya smiled just a little. But the curse wasn't gone. Not yet. One night as they lay near the fire, Bakery stirred. "Naya," he said, voice hoarse. "I dreamed of a place. A mountain with fire at its heart. A place where names are burned into stone. I think your curse began there." Naya looked at him. "I think we need to go." She didn't argue. Because for the first time the shadow didn't protest either. And somewhere in the forest, far from the reach of the village's fear, something ancient began to turn its gaze, watching Naya not with anger, but with sorrow. The girl born under the blood moon, once cursed to never be loved, now had a companion the curse could not consume. But love, it seemed, had never meant to be simple. Love in its most loyal form would kill. And it would kill again, if ever anyone dared to take her light away. The forest had long since turned from sanctuary to watchful beast. Each branch bent in silent judgment. Each gust of wind whispered of a reckoning. Naya had known quiet days since the stranger, Calum, first arrived. Days where she laughed without guilt, touched the earth without fear, and felt the presence of her curse as a silent companion instead of a furious warden. But peace is a flame in a dry forest. Word of her survival had returned to the village not through confession, but through careless footsteps. A shepherd had strayed too far, seen her by the river with Calum, seen her smile. He had run back with stories on his tongue, frothed with fear and righteous fury. The cursed girl lives, he cried. And worse, she draws in men again. The council convened within hours. Elders cloaked in tradition and trauma declared the ancient law. Where the curse returns, the fire must follow. They dressed warriors in ochre and prayer, painted symbols of binding on their chests. 6 men, armed with blades that had been bathed in salt and bloodroot. Each swore they would not return until the cursed girl was ash, and the man who dared touch her lay cold beside her. In the forest, Naya felt it before the birds fled. The trees stiffened. The sky grayed. The air grew heavy not with rain but with dread. Her shadow lengthened, though the sun was directly above. Calum, carving bark into medicine beside her hut, looked up. "You feel it too," she whispered. Calum nodded. "They're coming." The curse surged. Naya's breath caught as her heartbeat syncopated with something deeper, something that lived inside the roots and bones of the land. The shadow, the one that had whispered her name, cradled her sleep and killed for her, moved. It didn't speak. It simply began to grow. Branches twisted unnaturally. Leaves turned black and fluttered down like dying insects. Calum stood unafraid. He stepped between Naya and the forest path. "You should run," she said. He looked back. "And leave you alone again?" "Never." She felt it, her curse recoiling slightly, almost confused. He still didn't fear her. Even now. Especially now. And then the warriors arrived. The first came crashing through the trees with the arrogance of belief. Sword high, mouth full of curses, eyes blind to warning. He never even saw the roots rise from the earth and coil around his legs like serpents. He didn't scream when the forest dragged him under, it silenced him before he could. The second saw it and froze. But too late. 1,000 crows erupted from the canopy above, their beaks and wings tearing at him like fury made feather. He ran, but the trees did not let him go far. The third made it to Calum. Steel met bone. Calum fought, not like a warrior but like a man trying to delay fate. He took a wound to the side, blood blooming like a crimson rose on his tunic. But before the warrior could strike again, the shadow emerged, not behind Naya, not beside her, but from her. It surged like ink in water, solidifying into claws that tore the warrior apart. Naya gasped. She had never seen it take form. It turned to her, faceless and tall as the trees, and bowed its head. "You," she said, trembling. "You are me." It didn't nod. It didn't need to. She knew. The final 3 warriors huddled together. One muttered prayers. Another dropped his weapon and turned. The third pointed at Naya. "She is the death of our people. She brings ruin." The curse turned toward them. So did Naya. "No," she said, her voice low and calm. "I bring truth." The forest cracked open. The ground split at their feet. Roots emerged, writhing, hungry. The wind screamed. The warriors tried to flee, but the forest shifted. Paths changed. Trees moved. The woods did not allow betrayal to escape. Fire rained down, not from the sky but from the trees themselves, their sap igniting with otherworldly flame. It danced around Naya and Calum like a crown. Calum, clutching his side, collapsed to his knees. She rushed to him. "You're hurt." "I'm fine," he groaned. "Naya, it's not you. It never was. The curse, it's what they made you believe. But look at it now. It doesn't hate. It protects." Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't understand," she whispered. "It loves me." The curse turned its faceless head toward her, and she knew it to be true. Born under the blood moon, feared by all, Naya had carried loneliness like a shroud. But she had never truly been alone. The curse, born with her, had loved her the only way it knew how. And now it bled for her. Calum coughed, blood at his lips. If I die, it wasn't your fault. Naya turned. The fire swirled. The last warrior was running toward them, blade raised, madness in his eyes. Die, demon girl. Naya didn't flinch. The curse stepped forward. But this time, she stepped with it. Their forms merged. A scream tore through the forest, not of pain but power. Her hair rose in the wind, her eyes glowing silver red. The warrior halted mid-stride, his blade crumbling into dust as he stared at her, trembling. Naya raised her hand. Roots pierced the ground and lifted him into the air. But she did not kill him. I am not death, she said, voice echoing with ancient might. I am what your fear created. She let him go. He ran, broken in spirit, back to the village, screaming of shadows and truth. The forest fell silent. The curse receded, folding back into her like mist returning to sea. The fire died. The animals reappeared. And Calum still lived. She knelt beside him, weeping. You stayed. He touched her cheek. I told you. I always would. The forest bore witness as the curse, once wrath, now guardian, sealed its promise in silence. Far away, the village would crumble under guilt and fear, divided between those who clung to superstition and those who questioned everything they had been taught. But in the heart of the forest, Naya found something the curse had never allowed before. And maybe a beginning. The forest had quieted after the storm of blood. The skies hung low, burdened with the weight of what had passed. Naya stood at the edge of the scorched clearing where the warriors had fallen, those who came to sever her existence, now just ash feeding the earth. Beside her, the stranger, the healer whose kindness never faded, remained, though pale and shaken by the wrath he had witnessed. Naya couldn't cry. Not for the death. Not even for the survival. The shadow that had always followed her, her curse, had roared like a beast unleashed. And it had done so, she now knew, for love. But at what price? That night, as the wind whispered through the trees and the moon shied behind clouds, something called to her. Not in the voice of the curse, but something older, deeper. Her feet, guided by instinct more than thought, moved through the forest's veins, past trees with bark like weathered skin and roots that twisted like reaching fingers. She found herself before an ancient baobab, its trunk wide enough to house a dozen people, its limbs stretching like arms that had held generations. The air around it thrummed as if it breathed. Then came the voice, old, dry, and layered with time. You carry more than the curse, it said. You carry its heart. Naya stepped closer. Who are you? I am the memory of this land. The keeper of truths too heavy for mortal hearts. Sit, child. Listen. She obeyed, settling against the roots of the tree. As soon as her back touched the bark, a warmth traveled up her spine and her vision blurred. The forest melted away. In its place rose visions not her own. She saw a woman, young, beautiful, and defiant. She bore Naya's eyes and the same mark on her neck. Her name was Kalia. In her time, Kalia loved a man from a rival tribe. They met in secret, made vows beneath the moon. But their love was forbidden. Her family discovered it and made a bargain. If she did not renounce him, they would burn him and bind her soul so that no love would ever touch her bloodline again. Kalia refused. They burned him alive. In agony, her soul shattered. One piece cursed them, vowing that any love that bloomed in her bloodline would be crushed, just as hers had been. That piece, that rage twisted by grief, became a spirit, a shadow, a curse. And so it clung to each daughter born of Kalia's line. The tree murmured, protecting, possessing, killing, but not without reason. Naya trembled. Then the voice that speaks to me is not evil, said the tree. It is a broken fragment of love, desperate not to lose again. You are not cursed because love hates you. You are cursed because love was stolen, and it is fighting to live. Tears spilled down her cheeks now. Not for the dead warriors, not for the stranger's wounds, but for the spirit inside her, misunderstood, feared, and bound to destroy what it tried to protect. I never asked for this, she whispered. No child does, the tree replied. But you are the first to listen. The first to ask why. Naya closed her eyes, reaching inward, not with fear but with compassion. What does it want now? To be seen, the tree answered. To be freed. The wind stilled and the air thickened. Naya felt the presence again, the familiar warmth on her skin, the silence that always came before a shadow moved. I see you, she said aloud. I know you didn't want this. But I can't let you keep killing. Even for me. A gust rustled the leaves. A sadness passed through her like fog. The shadow didn't answer in words, but she felt its ache. She felt the centuries of watching, of protecting, of losing. "You're not alone anymore," Naya whispered. "Let's find another way." The tree pulsed beneath her. "A bond forged in truth can change old magic. You are the heart of the curse, but also its key." Naya stood, the bark reluctantly releasing her back. The forest looked different now, less like a prison, more like a memory trying to heal. She turned and walked back through the trees. The curse followed. Not like a beast, not like a warden, but like a child, unsure if it could be forgiven. And for the first time in her life, Naya felt something close to peace, not because she was free of the curse but because she understood it. And understanding, even when it doesn't heal, changes everything.